The situation in Gaza has laid bare the rules-based order for what it is. Genocide is good as long as it's profitable for capital. This is especially true if you factor in all of the absolutely abhorrent plans suggested by Trump and Netanyahu to solve the so-called Palestinian question. In this video, we're going to examine these genocidal musings in detail, not to prove to you they're horrific and insane, that's a given, but instead to show just how farcical they are and how unrealistic or stupid they would be to implement.
But before we do, it's OPSEC time. Let me show you something real quick. Google your name. Odds are some of your personal information comes up, right? If I search my name, it's just my public social media accounts. Want to know why? Because I use Aura, the sponsor of today's video. If you've ever wondered why you're constantly harassed by spam calls, texts, and emails, here's why. There are companies called data brokers whose sole purpose is to find and sell your data. They do it without your consent, and they make billions selling it to marketers, scammers, and even stalkers. And while they're legally required to remove your info if you ask, they make the process confusing and difficult on purpose. This is why I'm always recommending Aura to family and friends. They take care of everything for you. They remove your data from these sites, and they keep it removed. Aura is an all-in-one digital security tool. You may already use some other basic app, but not using Aura is like locking the front door, but leaving the back door wide open. And Aura doesn't just fight data brokers. They alert you if your personal data is found on the dark web, they provide real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, 24/7 identity theft monitoring, secure VPN, antivirus, parental controls, password manager, credit checker, and more. And if somehow something does happen, Aura includes $5 million in identity theft insurance. And they have US-based fraud experts on call 24/7. If you're anything like me, I'm sure you're sick and tired of these stupid, evil little companies stealing your personal information and using it to make a quick buck. That's why I use Aura. It keeps me and my family safe online. If you're ready to protect your data, you can get 2 weeks absolutely free when you use our link. During those 2 weeks, you'll see exactly where your data is being leaked and who's doing it. Give it a try. I promise you'll appreciate the peace of mind. Now, back to the show.
If you have been following this channel and our coverage of the Palestinian genocide, you probably already know the current situation on the ground. But for those of you who don't, here's the short version. The death toll, according to the Gazan Ministry of Health, as of making of this video, is 57,000, which is almost certainly a vast undercount due to rescue teams being unable to reach the tens of thousands trapped under rubble, with an additional 123,000 injured since October 2023. These numbers don't include the fact that the entire population is facing starvation thanks to Israel's siege blocking food, fuel, and medical supplies. Human Rights Watch rightly condemns this siege as a tool of extermination, and when factoring in the direct targeting of hospitals, schools, and tent encampments, it's clearly a plan aimed to render Gaza unfit for human habitation, with the hope that this will force the Palestinians out of Gaza, or as Israel calls it, voluntary exodus. This plan, called Gideon's Chariots, was approved by Netanyahu's security cabinet in early May 2025 and says that if Hamas rejects a deal, one designed to fail, mind you, Israel will flatten Gaza's infrastructure, if that's even possible, and force its 2 million plus residents into a concentration camp, and ultimately out of Gaza. The ultra-Zionist maniac Smotrich, finance minister and key architect of the plan, leaves no ambiguity. Quote, "There will be no in and out. Israel is finally going to conquer the Gaza Strip and send Palestinians to third countries." Meanwhile, Israel is annexing the West Bank and has given authority over the 60% under Israeli control to far-right settler named Hillel Roth. Roth has been tasked with legalizing outposts, seizing Palestinian land, and fast-tracking settlement expansion. The Israeli Policy Forum notes that settlement approvals, which previously required 4 layers of political approval and military sign-off, now rest solely on Smotrich, which allows for the swift passage of legalization to further encroach on occupied territories. Unfortunately, Israel's military aggression extends beyond Palestine to neighboring Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. Before we continue, here's a small reminder to click the subscribe button. This is a fully viewer-funded project bringing you anti-imperialist news and geopolitical analysis. Rate the video, subscribe, and tell us what you think in the comments. For those with extra motivation to support us, there's a Patreon link in the description as well. Thank you very much. Now that we have that context established, let's talk about the plans put forward by Israel and the US. We'll start with the leaked military plans diplomats got their hands on in May 2025. In these plans, Gaza is carved into 3 concentration camps, separated by 4 military corridors where no Palestinian can set foot. Of course, they don't use the term concentration camps, they've instead branded this with the sterile title Stage 3, the complete takeover of Gaza. The plan resembles their Morag corridor playbook from last year when Israel bulldozed Rafah neighborhoods to build forts and barracks. Sadly, this new scheme is already in action. As we speak, bulldozers are paving roads and building barracks over the rubble of homes Israel has been flattening with 2,000-pound bombs. Clearing the rubble took 3 weeks of grinding demolition work which permanently pulverized remains and memories. These plans were leaked on Nakba Day, interesting timing, and just days earlier the IDF ordered civilians to move even further south while they seized the newly vacated territory. The hasbara you'll hear about the situation goes like this: Israel will conquer Gaza with a sustained presence and move Palestinians for their own protection. Obviously, don't fall for this. Israel is putting Palestinians in an ever-shrinking concentration camp that is meant to become a death camp. Remember, the goal is the full eradication of the Palestinian people as stated by Israeli politicians at every level, all the way to the top. Next, we will explore the plan to send Palestinians to the Sinai. When the US and Israel pushed for the expulsion of Gazans to Sinai, Egyptian President al-Sisi clearly stated, Egypt will not participate in the displacement of Palestinians, an act of injustice that would threaten Egyptian security, and that doing so would ignite mass protests in Egypt itself. The Sinai, where ISIS affiliates once operated, would become a security tinderbox. Why? Well, ethnically cleansing 2 million people there risks disruption Egypt wouldn't be able to contain. The Sinai would become a staging ground for attacks that would drag Egypt into war with Israel. Again, something the Israelis know and fanatically welcome. In response to this unacceptable plan, Egypt has drafted its own. Egypt wants to repurpose rubble for temporary housing, police retrain for security, and wants to exclude Hamas from any future in Gaza while the Palestinian Authority takes over. The price tag, 50 to 80 billion, a sum that will require worldwide cooperation and Gulf states to provide funding. Quote, there's no alternative to peace, stressed Egyptian officials, saying that reconstruction is one of the first steps to Palestinian statehood. Arab leaders rallied behind the plan at a summit in Cairo, strongly rejecting expulsion as a non-starter. Next, we will take a look at the plan to move Palestinians to Jordan. But to understand Jordan's position, it helps to know a bit of history because this isn't the first time Palestinians were forced into Jordan. Flashback to 1967. Israel has just concluded its war with Egypt and Jordan, which forced 300,000 Palestinians into Jordan. Armed factions like the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a Marxist organization, turned Amman into a war zone. They hijacked planes, shelled Israeli towns like Beit Shean, and took hostages. In 1970, 15 to 20,000 Fedayeen fighters roamed freely, calling Hussein a puppet, trying to assassinate him multiple times. Basically, the displacement and lack of support from Jordan caused a war that needlessly killed thousands, pitting Palestinians against Jordanians while Iraqi troops lurked on the border. Palestinians call this Black September. Not hard to see why. Today, every Israeli raid and land grab in the West Bank makes Jordan more nervous. Since 2024, Israel has launched 37 drone strikes and airstrikes on crowded West Bank camps like Jenin and Tulkarem, then escalated in August with thousands of troops, bulldozers, and warplanes in the largest West Bank operation since 2002. Jordan rightly sees these as attempts at expulsion and a move to annex the West Bank. From Jordan's perspective, Israeli policy threatens their national interests and security. Officials openly fear Netanyahu's allies want to force Palestinians across the Jordan River, making Jordan the new Palestine. But Jordan's hands are tied. The Jordanian people have little say in their government, one handpicked by US and UK agents. It survives on $1.5 billion in annual US aid and a 1994 peace treaty with Israel. So while Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi calls Israel's actions genocide, security cooperation with Israel continues. Georgetown's Nader Hashemi describes their decision paralysis as panic mode. They're stuck between their own flimsy sovereignty and US aid. The far right outside of Israel further raises the temperature by promoting the idea that Jordan is Palestine, like when Dutch leader Geert Wilders was promoting this explicitly in 2023. But to Jordanians, this is a threat, because last time the idea was floated, it ended up being a nightmare, and Jordan's domestic politics haven't changed much since then. We'll come back to this Jordan is Palestine idea later, but for now, know that it doesn't originate with the European far right. It's just that the far right loves imperialism. Now, let's consider the most unrealistic plan given serious consideration, moving 1 million Gazans into Libya, a country currently ravaged by civil war. Several sources claim that Washington pitched this to Libya's rival governments, dangling billions in frozen assets as bait, though the US State Department calls these claims untrue. Never mind that Libya's own 7.4 million people are also suffering a NATO-made catastrophe while warlords battle for control. 1 million is a lot, roughly half the Gazan population, but to give you an idea of how much 1 million refugees are in relation to Libya's population, it would be like the US taking 46 million people overnight. The logistics are absolutely insane. Transporting 1 million Palestinians to Libya would require 1,173 flights, with the world's largest plane running around the clock. But since Gaza has no airport, they'd likely need to use buses. Imagine huge convoys of buses snaking nearly 2,100 kilometers to Benghazi. But each bus only holds, 55 people, and it would be thousands of trips through active conflict zones. So what about ferries? You'd need hundreds of voyages carrying 2,000 people each across mine-infested waters. In any case, Libya has made its position clear through its foreign ministry that it unequivocally rejects the resettlement of Palestinians. None of these plans will result in peace. Every plan ends with the further immiseration of Palestinians. However, senior Hamas official Bassem Naim sums up the real reason they'll all fail. Palestinians are very rooted in their homeland. They are exclusively the only party who have the right to decide what to do and what not to do. Enter the outraged West. Remember now, this phase of the genocide has been going on since October 2023, so the outrage is a bit late. In May of this year, Britain suspended free trade talks with Israel and sanctioned individual settlers after Israel's month-long blockade causing famine in Gaza. Foreign Secretary David Lammy, using rhetoric stronger than his actions, said history will judge them, blocking aid, expanding the war, dismissing the concerns of your friends and partners. This is indefensible, and it must stop. He summoned Israel's ambassador, Tzipi Hotovely, to condemn the cruel and indefensible siege, while his own country's sanctions remain extremely weak, targeting just 3 individuals, 2 outposts, and 2 settler groups, when it should be the entire state of Israel. It's performative. Even so, Israel called these weak actions unjustified and regrettable, and waved off the trade talk pause since they were already stalled. The EU's response was also tepid. Foreign Policy Chief Kallas announced a review of the bloc's trade agreement with Israel, citing catastrophic conditions in Gaza. She claimed a strong majority of members backed the move, 17 of 27 states, so not really a strong majority after all, and of course offered no timeline or concrete steps. Dutch diplomats pushed harder, forcing a formal debate on suspending the pact entirely under Article 2, which allows halting deals over human rights abuses. Yet, internal paralysis gutted any chance of that moving forward. Hungary vetoed sanctions on violent settlers unless matched by penalties against Hamas, despite existing EU sanctions on Hamas figures and the move not making sense. They are under siege. You can't be sanctioned more than that. Spain's plea to go beyond words was completely ignored when Irish lawmakers noted Israel had fired on diplomatic convoys in the West Bank, asking if they treat our diplomats like this, imagine how they treat the Palestinians. The EU was silent. As Polish Minister Mr. Adam conceded, all states have serious concerns, but consensus vanished when actions loomed. In other words, they are unable or unwilling to put their money where their mouth is. Surprisingly, Germany's rhetoric has shifted too, calling Gaza situation unbearable and halting new arms exports. But this only came after polls showed 51% of Germans opposed weapon sales to Israel. Token gestures are the norm. But even so, they represent the strongest pushback from the West so far since Netanyahu finally allowed aid trucks into Gaza after 11 weeks of pressure. And he admitted caving to allies only because they couldn't stomach, quote, images of mass famine. Of course, the famine itself he has no problem with. In the end, the so-called concrete actions promised by allies like the EU, UK, France, and Canada are meaningless because they don't target the state of Israel. In January 2025, Israel's foreign ministry posted this map on its Arabic-language social media pages, sparking immediate fury across the Middle East. The map claims to show the ancient kingdom of Israel stretching deep into modern-day Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. The post claimed it is historical legacy tied to biblical rulers and emphasized the cultural and religious development of that era while ignoring that other peoples of the region have done the same. Arab nations viewed it as an affront to their sovereignty and a sign of Israel's expansionist ambitions. This was then followed by remarks from the finance minister Smotrich in 2024. The future of Jerusalem is to expand to Damascus, and the posting of a new deleted Jerusalem Post article questioning if Lebanon was part of Israel's promised territory. The world is now confronted with the fact that this extremist ideology isn't a myth. It's Israeli foreign policy. So, where did this idea come from? Its foundations trace back to the revisionist Zionists of the early 1900s, led by Ze'ev Jabotinsky. He demanded occupation of all of the biblical promised land. That is, for them, from the Euphrates to the Nile. This covers Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and all of Palestine. The movement gained momentum after Israel's 1967 Six-Day War, which pushed to permanently settle seized territories. By 1948, their youth wing, Betar, declared Israel's founding a first step towards reclaiming all historic boundaries, vowing to continue aggression until Jabotinsky's directives for a wholly free and indivisible land were realized. But ideology isn't the only driver. Particular needs matter too. Early Zionist settlers knew Palestine's available water couldn't support the desired population surge, a state of 3 to 4 million within a generation. Large-scale farming depended on controlling the Jordan River, Lebanon's Litani, and Syria's Yarmouk and Yabok. They called for a great wave of Jewish immigration to settle the empty spaces. Those spaces, of course, were not empty. This is just settler propaganda, plain and simple. Military strategists mapped targets clearly: the Sinai to block Egypt, the West Bank and East Jordan to shield against Iraq and Saudi Arabia, and the North, including the Litani, Hermon, and Golan, for water and increased defense. As Moshe Dayan stated, expansionism is the, quote, fulfillment of a people's ancestral dreams. So, what's the reality? In short, this won't happen. Israel doesn't have enough troops to carry out such operations, nor the capability to maintain a long-term occupation of any significantly sized area. Amman has 4 million people, Damascus has 3 million, and the IDF has been bogged down in Gaza since 2023, despite overwhelming firepower and an unending siege of the entire population. Even if they did have the troops necessary, the troops themselves wouldn't want to. After 20 months of war in Gaza, reservists are begging to refuse extra tours of duty en masse. Daniel Yaholam called for 110 days of reserve duty in May 2025, declared he wouldn't serve in Gaza or the West Bank, even calling the war patently illegal. During trial, he stated, "I have the moral duty to refuse," and in response, the army took the rare step of sentencing him to prison. Most soldiers aren't punished at all. Attorney Noah Levy, who advises 200-plus objectors, says this is Israel's biggest wave of refusal and that soldiers are losing faith in the system. When the IDF recalled 15,000 exempt reservists in 2024, many refused after some soul-searching. Chief of Staff admitted severe force depletion, pushing to draft ultra-Orthodox Jews despite their own strong opposition to serving. They are so desperate they are trying to recruit reluctant soldiers. But of 19,000 orders sent to Haredi men by mid-2025, fewer than 300 have enlisted. Even decorated soldiers are leaving. Eran Tamir, who moved from the US to Israel to serve shortly after the 2023 Hamas operation, is refusing his call-up, calling the war a moral low point and a deception. Contrary to all the disgusting videos of IDF soldiers giddily celebrating the destruction they're causing, morale is extremely low, as evidenced by units reporting record-low turnout and ever-rising suicide rates. But it got even worse after leaks showed hostage recovery ranked last below permanent military control over Gaza on the government military objective list for Gaza. One reservist confessed, "I'm ashamed of my government, and I have no reason to serve besides camaraderie." Netanyahu's dreams of a greater Israel are delusional. Israel's capacity to execute the planned occupation is collapsing, as their capacity to carry out genocide further falters into complete dependency on the US. Nevertheless, they continue to hold expansionist ambitions and have plans drawn up. The truth is, Israel is going to go through with as much as they can for as long as they can to kill, injure, and starve as many Palestinians as they can get away with. They will fail, but the toll will be significant. History will judge harshly the failure to stop this modern Holocaust for the sake of American capital and weapons industry profits.